here that has some information about, that has a portfolio, that has some of the research that was done along with an application for the organization that we're starting called the Friends of the Reservation in Charles Corner. Some information about or a list of the families that live at the reservation and other resources from the county. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. My name is Kristen Allen. Welcome. Thank you for your interest in family history. Our family story starts around 1865 at the reservation, also known as Charles Corner. An estimated 4,283 freedmen settled in this largely African-American community where Anthony and Octavia started their family. Residents of the reservation were self-sufficient and engaged in businesses such as farming, oystering, and barbering. For 36 years, the descendants of Anthony and Octavia Hunley have been getting together to celebrate and honor our history as a family, as well as note the shared history we have with other families that lived in the area known interchangeably as the reservation or Charles Corner. This weekend marks 101 years after the Hunleys and the other families on the reservation were forcibly removed in 1918 when President Woodrow Wilson issued Executive Order 1472 to immediately seize their land for the Navy land for the Navy by eminent domain. This newly acquired property was called the Naval Weapons Station. Residents were given 30 days to evacuate 11,433 acres with compensation to be worked out later. Our families strive to receive just compensation, even though they did not get their land back after the war. However, they moved on, and today we are here to honor them and share their story. So to date, the College of William and Mary has conducted 2 studies on the community. Cast Down Your Bucket Where You Are, an ethno-historical study of African American community on the lands of the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station, 1865 to 1918, and Community Building After Emancipation, an anthropological study of Charles Corner, Virginia, 1862 to 1922. Additionally, the U.S. Navy continues to conduct archaeological research on land previously owned by the residents. According to the authors of Cast Down Your Bucket Where You Are, who were faculty at the College of William and Mary, quote, African Americans have been largely ignored in historical studies, even in Virginia, when African Americans have lived in Virginia since 1619. This is particularly true of the African Americans who survived the Civil War and established new lives as freedmen in the Tidewater. Although a fair amount is known about the lives of African Americans who were enslaved, comparatively, little is known about the lives of free African Americans prior to the Civil War. For this reason, the authors of Cast Down Your Bucket have asserted that the history of freed African Americans in the community on what came to be called the reservation near Yorktown is crucial to a greater understanding of the history of African Americans. Historical evidence suggests that at least one free Black community was established in York County by the middle of the 1800s. Testimony by a woman by the name of Fanny Epps, who was born in 1895, suggests that some free African Americans settled on occupied by the Naval Weapons Station prior to the Civil War. This area is identified on the map on the screen, located between the James River and the York Rivers. This area was agriculturally rich in timber, produce, oyster beds, and fishing. This free black settlement was the foundation of a post-war community known as a reservation, which is where Anthony and Octavia resided. So this is just another map depicting the reservation where you will see the family's parcel of land. I believe this map did come from the Navy, yeah. In the 1920s? Okay. So land ownership for African Americans was highly unusual at this time. This map, so prior to developing this map, the Navy surveyed each lot owned by families on the reservation and made extensive notes describing their homes, farms, and other property assets. You will hear more about this later in the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So, as you can see, Kristen and I are tag teaming, and it's my great honor to share the story of my ancestors, Anthony and Octavia Hundley. Before I start this presentation, and this part of the presentation, I would like to say and acknowledge that the story of Anthony and Octavia, while unique to our family, is not unique relative to the residents of Charles Corner. And so we are very dedicated to expanding and understanding more about other families who were at Charles Corner, and again, you will be hearing more about this later. But to pick up where Kristen started off, we want to change the narrative of what it means to be African American in this country. The narrative currently is we were enslaved, then some people freed us, and then we kind of went on with it. Part of the narrative that is missing is the story of three African Americans, as you've already heard Sarah mention, but I would like to just ask that you keep this in mind as we share the story of Anthony and Octavia Hundley. So during the years from 1830 to 1860, prior to the Civil War, there were large numbers of free African Americans living in York County and other parts of the Tidewater area. As I mentioned, Anthony and Octavia were born during this time. Anthony was born in 1844, free. Octavia in 1848, free. Notably, in the 1860 census, again, before the Civil War, Octavia's father, who was Henry Redcross, was an oysterman, suggesting that he was a free African American. Now, in 1860, when Anthony was 16 years of age and Octavia was 12, there were on record, there were 140 free African American families living in York County. Of these, 19 owned the land they farmed, and 49 others are recorded as having valuable property such as boats, livestock, and tools. So you have the contents. Now, when the Civil War ended in 1865, there were over 4,200 African Americans living in York County. The vast majority of them were self-sufficient. When you think about it, they always had to be. They began farming lands, and many of them were farming lands that were abandoned by white slave owners and white plantation owners, one of them being the Tinsley Farm, which is co-located with Charles Corner. It should be kept in mind, however, that despite the fact that they owned this land and that they were free and they were self-sufficient, they were operating against other odds, such as smallpox and malaria, that caused the death of many people, including women and children. The one thing I wanted to reference here, I should have mentioned it on the other slide, is when you have this convergence of free African Americans already there at what is known as Charles Corner, during the Civil War, what occurred was as the Union was beginning to acquire areas, they would direct emancipated black people to go over there, right? So it used to, meaning when I say over there, I mean in this instance, Charles Corner. And people were finding them. They would hook up with the Union Army and then be directed or deposited in this area. So during that time, you had a combination of the free African Americans who were already there, as well as those who were emancipated. And during that time, they began to cooperate. And as I told you, the occupation of Tennessee Farm, or the occupation of that land in terms of working the land, was done by free African Americans as well as those who were emancipated. Now, the reservation had several other families that I just wanted to acknowledge. There are more than what I'm about to reference to you. But this idea of community building happened between the Hunleys. It included the Banks family, the Vandals, the Rothers, the Lees. And they began to establish and expand this idea of self-reliance. In 1880, for example, when Anthony was 36 and Octavia was 32, they had 6 children: Betty, Margaret, William, Anthony, Martha Jane, and Joseph. And in 1880, Anthony, along with Octavia's father, again Henry Red Cross, and others, purchased jointly land from the Tinsley Farm for a total of $80. So you had this understanding that we need to own the land and work our own land, and they cooperated with one another in order to do that. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to go get ours, you can own your own. They jointly made the decision to purchase land. This is significant because there were still several other African Americans who were living in the area who were, I don't want to say given the option, had to choose shared property because they had to make a living. And if you know anything about shared property, it was really considered to be just another form of slavery, really. You would contract with a farmer, sometimes it was a former slave owner, agreed to work their land. You would wait a whole year to see what the crop brought in, whether or not you made any money, that you would have to rely on the math of the landowner in order to determine your compensation. And if you didn't like the arrangement and you left before these things were set up, you could be arrested, you could be lynched. So you had a situation where you had this community opting to pool the money together in order to farm the land, which is extremely powerful when you think about it. I try not to get emotional, but it's a powerful story here, which I'm so proud of. In any event, in 1904, Anthony died intestate without a will, leaving the land to Octavia. And Octavia died in 1912 at the age of 64. She also died without a will. When that occurred, their interest in their property vested with their 10 children. So this is, and there's a poster on display here. This is simply a poster of all of the 10 hungry children. And you will be hearing a story about what happened with their land in the period that followed. We don't have information. This presentation will be pretty long when we went through all of them, but there will be bits of stories you hear about 5 of our great aunts and uncles.
So, at the end of the Civil War, the demand for land was fierce. During the war, Southern landowners, once considered to be Southern aristocrats, were forced to abandon or flee their property. It was during this time that the lands were seized by the Union Army. Following the war, land was given to African Americans, but then taken away and redistributed to or returned to Southern whites who had instituted the sharecropping system that he was referencing. Take a moment to understand and appreciate the fact that less than 20 years following the war, during the Reconstruction, you had black families such as the Hunleys owning land. outbuilding, a well, and orchards. They owned an oyster bed, they had farm animals, and they had crops. All 10 children had a share of interest, whether they lived there or not. So let's talk about some of the children. So Betty Hunley Brown Telefarrow Washington, she had her last name. So it's because she was widowed 3 times. She and her husband owned the land. She also had 1/10 interest in Anthony and Octavia's lot. She holds significance because she was an African American landowner before women had the right to vote. Okay, William Hunley. And William Hunley is my great-grandfather. That's my dad. So William Hunley had 5 girls. Glenna, Cora, Willoughby, Eliza, and Aileen. And Cora is my grandmother. Glenna passed away at the age of 2. They were all born on the reservation. Something to note about William is that when he was removed, he went to work at the Naval Weapons Station. So, it's a testament to the fact that while they were forced off their land, they were very patriotic people, right? They believed in the war effort. So I don't want to say that they got over it. I don't know that, but they moved on. And there were a lot of families that went to work at the Naval Weapons Station. Catherine, her birth is unknown to us. She was married to John Brown, who was also an oysterman. A lot of these women on the reservation were fishers and oystermen. And she owned 5.7 acres. Sarah Hunley King. She owned 3.5 acres, purchased for $100 in 1905 from the Roberts family. You're going to hear a lot more about Victoria and James Jr.'s story in a moment. We're going to get into how they appealed the land grab. We're going to read that letter, their letter to the Navy and the Navy's response. You'll also hear a little bit more about Joe Doc Hunley later in this presentation. He served as the family representative in testimonies to the Navy's valuation board. I'm sorry, I switched the slide. So we created this slide just to give you a little bit of historical context as to what the time was like for African American people at that time. So we have Black Progress, White Terror. So in the early 1900s, life was not easy for African Americans. They endured violence, discrimination, economic oppression, educational oppression, but they strived to establish their own schools, churches, businesses. They were self-sufficient, they were industrious, and they were patriotic.
Okay, so you'll forgive me while I'm going to need to toggle between this laptop and some notes that I took that I want to make sure that I cover. So also, sometimes with history, as it relates to African Americans, we kind of get this tunnel vision as to what's going on. So Piston and I made the decision that we also wanted to pull back and look at what was happening politically at the time. So here you see a photo of Woodrow Wilson, who was the 28th President of the United States from 1913 to 1921. He was elected twice. And he has a significant part of this story. He was born in Virginia, raised in South Carolina, he was a Democrat, but a Dixiecrat. He was considered at the time to be a progressive statesman. I'm going to repeat it. Now think now of what we think of when we think of progressive, and think about what I'm about to tell you. Okay, so he was considered to be a progressive statesman. He supported the women's right to vote, which was very unpopular with some people at the time. He established the League of Nations, which is the precursor for the United Nations. He also coined the phrase, making the world safe for democracy. Pretty good guy, right? Right? You would think. I guess some people thought that was true, except on the moment. He was a racist. Why did I tell you that? Because oftentimes when people kind of galvanize around national issues, they don't necessarily think about the impact that those issues have on individual communities, and he's significant for a reason. Now, why am I saying he's a racist? Because at the time he was blatant with what he had to say about it. He actually sent black troops to World War I, and I will get into his background on what happened with World War I. And he determined that they would be servant soldiers and that they would be designated in only servant type of roles. So you're talking, you're cooking, you're cleaning, that type of mechanics, that type of thing. Not to serve on the front line, which many were anxious to do. We have a history of serving in this country from the Revolutionary War. So it wouldn't have been uncommon to fight on the front lines. He also met with black leaders in Washington, D.C. when he became president and told them that segregation was to their benefit. It was like, oh, this is actually good for you, keeps you safe. And he felt that the KKK was established just to preserve cultural history. But we know better now, and they knew better then. The other thing that I work in Washington, D.C., is that when he came to the building, when he came to D.C., he noticed that the federal buildings, or the people in the federal buildings were working together in an integrated environment, and he resegregated the federal buildings. Okay, so that's the background on our president. Why is he significant? Okay, when we entered World War I in 1917, there was an some interesting background on it, because prior to that time, the United States had determined they didn't want to have anything to do with World War I. Just let them work it out, they're going to fight, just leave them alone. The other thing that we were doing, was while the war was going on, we were selling arms to both sides, to opponents, and we were making a pretty good living at it. However, the British Army had done a blockade that affected our trade with Germany, and as a result, we couldn't sell as many arms. And for that reason, we were basically having to make some choices about whether or not we were going to be involved in the war. There were a number of other scenarios, you all can read up on World War I, but I'm giving you that background because the pain point for the United States was the navigable waters and the ability to move freely in the navigable waters. So at this time, Woodrow Wilson determined we're going to have to, beef up our Navy. We're going to have to do something about that. So he decided in 1918 to issue an executive order, Executive Order number 1472, which would acquire land for the building of a Navy mine depot in Yorktown. And that land that he was talking about was Charles Corner. It was the acquisition of 11,000 acres of land. In November of 1918, he then issued another executive order. And that executive order said, we might not need all of it, just in case, but we're kind of holding on to it, but we might not need all of it. I should say also that the executive order, when it hit, gave, as you heard Kristen say at the introduction, it gave the residents in the area 30 days to vacate their homes and their property.
These were not people, as you heard Kristen say, these were people who owned the land, who were farming and oystering and cooperating with one another, who had churches, who had schools, and they had 30 days to leave. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, thank you, Kristen. The other thing, I keep clicking this like I'm doing something. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out here is, can you do that? Can the government come through with an executive order and force people off their land? And the answer is yes. I'm kind of glad that we have the context of executive orders now, because I think the first time I referenced this, executive orders were not very popular. But I think just politically speaking these days, everybody's familiar with the president signing executive orders, and they carry a lot of weight. They carry weight because they enable the agencies that respond to the president's agenda to actually take action. So in this particular case, when the executive order was signed by the president, he signed implementation of the removal of the families, the assessment of the land, and the just compensation. He assigned all of that to the Navy. Next slide, please. This slide. Okay. Now, this slide, this slide just gives you the chronology. So I mentioned that there were two executive orders in 1918. One was August, one was November. The Navy began doing appraisals of property in December of 1918. So they were moving very quickly. I should note that when the executive orders hit, the residents of Charles Corner petitioned the Navy for an extension, and they were granted an extension to stay until April of the following year. So think about this for a second. So it's hot, like next month is August, right? So you get this notice, you have to leave your house in 30 days. I just want you to pause with that. And then you say, and then they turn around and say, because we're taking your land, but we might not need it. Okay. And you then have to galvanize with your neighbors, find a lawyer, who I'll talk about in a moment, petitioning to get permission, and then you're in limbo through summer, through fall, through winter of the following year. I mean, just imagine that. Just imagine having to move, let alone in 30 days. When I did this research, I was just flabbergasted about just the thought of it. I should also say that some of the additional claims, even though they were given this 30-day window and an extension, because of oyster claims that were in play, those went on from 1922 to 1927. I can't tell what that last one says. 1922 to 1923, the valuation part, I can't tell what that says. My apologies, folks. Okay, so from 1922 to 1923, there were questionnaires that were given to the families that basically asked them to list the value of their property. So that's the political front, that's the legal front, and, thank you. Okay, so this was big news. And so this is an excerpt from the newspaper that talks about the United States taking land and impacting 11,000 acres. The point that I want to make here is I was looking at these articles, silly me, I was looking at these articles for some sympathy regarding the African Americans impacted, but that's really not what happened. The area did go beyond Charles Corner, and you did have sympathy for the white residents of the area. But you also have to keep in mind, because of what happened after the Civil War, people being directed to this area, that Charles Corner was considered to be a black settlement. So it was like, okay, the black people live over there, and it's able to get us out, that's cool. But now that you're removing them, and they have to move, who's going to sell the land? That was a very interesting proposition that we had to deal with, as did white residents. Next slide. All right. So you heard me mention this 1492 with a twist, and basically the Navy could not make up its mind how it wanted to develop the land, right? And so they said, well, we're kind of canvassing all of this, but we don't necessarily need all of it. And what they did with the families was very interesting. When they issued 1492, they notified the families that they had already told they had to leave and said, if you are interested in keeping your land, write us and tell us that you want to do that. And then we will give you compensation for basically using your land while we're figuring out what to do with it. That's basically what happened. Okay, so you'll hear more about what happened after that.
So they did appeal. And here is an excerpt, and I'll read it because I don't think you guys can, it's very, very faint. So this is a letter from James Payne to the Navy. He wrote to the U.S. Navy in 1920 and in 1921, inquiring about receiving his land back. And here's the letter. So letter of June 10, 1920 to the Valuation Board. Dear Sir, I received a letter come from Navy Department. This property is known as Docket 17, and I have an area of 3.9 acres as showing by the government survey, stating that you will turn my land back. Yes, sir. I would like to have my land back. I would like to have my land back. Thank you. Whensoever the government see fit. Thank you very much. James H. Payne, Williamsburg, Virginia. Let's see what the Navy said. I think we know what the Navy said. Okay, yes, this is the letter on June 9, 1921. Dear Sir, I received a letter stating that you have no need for my property. Yes, sir. I will take it back and accept compensation and hope that I will hear from you at the early period, as I have lumber laying out in the weather and has been for some time and just been in the way. I did not really know what to do about repairing, and in my condition, always repair a little at a time. But it has been so long since I've had the privilege, it will be a little hard. When can I have my property, please? Respectfully yours, James